Women in Water, a bilingual initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. In this podcast, we are dedicated to empowering women, challenging stereotypes, and delving into essential water issues. We highlight the knowledge and experience of women committed to our environment, especially in the border region between Mexico and the United States. Hear from women in politics, activists, businesswomen, teachers, scientists, and many other professionals who share a common purpose. Water unites us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview of the Women in Water initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Water. My name is Elia Tapia, and I'm very pleased to be here today with Dr. America Lutz Ley. The Women in Water initiative was created to amplify the voices of women working on water, environmental, and socio-environmental issues across the U.S.-Mexico border. Through these conversations, we hope to learn more about their experiences, their research, and leadership of women who are contributing to a better understanding of the water challenges in our region. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with America, whose work brings together water security, climate change adaptation, socio-ecological systems, mining, environmental justice, and feminist political ecology. America is the academic director and also a research professor at the Center for Studies on Development at El Colegio de Sonora. She holds a PhD in arid resource science with a concentration in global change from the University of Arizona, and a master's degree in social science with a concentration in public affairs from El Colegio de Sonora. America, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a real pleasure to have you in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Elia, and the pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for this invitation.
All right. I'm really excited about this interview. So I'm going to start right ahead. America, I would like to start by learning a little more about your personal and professional journey. How did you become interested in water security, climate change adaptation, and socio-environmental issues in arid regions?
Well, I was born, raised, and educated in the Sonora, Arizona region. So for me, it was kind of, you can say, natural to be interested in water because that is our main limiting factor here in this region of the world. But that was not my start. I started as a psychologist, and that makes some people even laugh because how do you go from psychology to water issues, right? But I had this advisor that was one of the main environmental psychologists in Latin America, who is also a graduate from the University of Arizona, actually, with this group of work with Robert Bechtel that maybe some people will recognize in environmental psychology. So for me, it was kind of started with this interest in how people get involved in environmental behavior and how people become a part of these civil society organizations, environmental initiatives, environmental movements. But I graduated from psychology, not from water governance or climate change or none of that. So I finished my bachelor degree in psychology, and then I entered El Colegio de Sonora, where I got the master's degree. And my thesis for the master defense was about environmental civil society organizations in Hermosillo, the capital of Sonora State. From there, I started working as a research assistant at El Colegio de Sonora with this very consolidated research group that worked in water governance, actually, and water management. And they were collaborating with the Ural Center for Studies in Public Policy in several projects related to water issues. So I got involved in that too. I learned about information exchange between both the states, Arizona and Sonora, resilience, ecological, social resilience for the river basins of both the states. And in 2012, I got a scholarship from the Fulbright program here in Mexico, Fulbright sorry, the name is Fulbright Garcia Robles is the correct name for that kind of scholarship here in Mexico, and also from the former CONACYT, the Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología in Mexico, the National Council of Science and Technology. And then I started my PhD in arid lands resource sciences. So that was the exact point, I feel, that actually broadened my perspective. And having some experience in water governance, I started including other types of topics. For example, adaptive governance, environmental justice, double exposures, that we will talk about that too in a little bit. So it expanded my perspective beyond just water management issues. And when I finished my PhD, I returned to Mexico and obtained a position in the faculty of El Colegio de Sonora. And in that point, I introduced the topics of mining, large-scale mining, large-scale agriculture, all these issues that are called extractivism in terms of academic, in academic language, right? So I started looking at how these things interact with climate change and produce other types of stressors for the region. And mining is also a big activity in Arizona. So we have this sharing of binational interest related to extractive industries, climate change, and environmental and global social economic changes.
Thank you, America, for your answer. I think you might be the first environmental psychologist and water expert that I have met. Maybe I'm pretty sure you're not the only one, but I think that it's a really nice combination. It's really interesting, especially for understanding the social dimensions of water and climate challenges. It is really, really helpful to hear how your personal and professional path has led you to this work. I'd like to move from your own trajectory to some of the issues you study. So from your perspective, what are some of the main water challenges facing communities in Sonora and the broader arid region? And yes, you already mentioned this, but the majority of the challenges that currently Sonora is facing, like they relate a lot to everything that happens in Arizona as well. So it's like this broader arid region with some challenges that they also share.
Yes. Well, I used to think that the problem was water scarcity before I actually started studying these things. But now I recognize that there is this interaction between different types of stressors, and the combination of those, the patterns of interaction between natural and social and economic stressors and factors is what actually makes the problem actually bigger, right? Is what we call water wicked problems. And it's because you can see at just one part of the system, right? And you have this disciplinary view and you focus on that specific topic. But then when you discover water governance, you start realizing that there are many more issues connected to that specific problem. So in my case, and because I live here and I was born here in this region, I realized that climate change, the pervasive drought, water scarcity, growing demand, growing population, growing uncertainty, socioeconomic globalization, all of them reinforce each other, and they create these kind of big issues that are very difficult to address from single disciplines. So for me, the topic will be not one single factor. It will be the combination of factors for each specific region that creates these untractable problems in water management. Beyond that, there are some very identifiable dynamics going on in the region. One of them is obviously climate change. We are a hotspot of climate change. More droughts, more variability in precipitation, more dryness, more heat. So those are well-known factors. there is also a problem with overdraft from groundwater in all the border. And you guys, you Elia and your team, I know that you guys work on these things. So many of the sources of water, a great volume of water is used for production of commodities that actually go to the international market. So we are indeed exporting water from this desert in form of agricultural goods and industrial goods. So the third problem that I see beyond those that I mentioned is related to water equity. If you have many users and a finite resource system that is water, then you find yourself trying to distribute and to allocate something that is shrinking between groups that are expanding their demand. And sometimes we don't consider these things. It seems that our main value as society and as government is economic benefit, and we don't know how much this will cost in the long term for ecosystems and for hydrological cycles and for sustainability in the long run. So yes, we have this combination of different related problems, and you can address one, but that won't solve the problem.
Well, thank you for your answer. I think that gives a very clear picture of how complex these issues are, especially in a region where environmental and social pressures often come together. So I know that an important part of your research it's about mining and water security, and I was wondering about this concept that you can that we can see in literature, the concept of double exposure. I was wondering if you can help us understand about rural communities facing both climate change and mining related pressures.
Yes, I love this framework. I mean, it makes sense from a perspective and from an academic perspective, but also it made sense at the first time that I hit the field, as we say, right? When we started doing field work, and people was reporting that they responded not only to climatic stressors, they were concerned about drug addiction in their communities, poverty, subsidizing agricultural activities, lack of rain. So they were responding to these complex kind of monsters, I will say, of stressors. And they didn't have this like single answer for this specific stressor and another answer for this another stressor. So this framework that comes from the work of Ryan Lenchenko and Karen O'Brien is about how communities and societies not only are facing the effects of global environmental change, from which climate change is maybe the most known example, but they are also facing all these economic and social changes that come from globalization. So, for example, in the case of rural communities, especially here in Sonora, and I will say Arizona too, they are facing the shrinking of water resources, the variability of water resources, the increasing temperatures, but they are also facing a pressure on production of agricultural products, of livestock products, of industrial products. So when you combine the two types of dynamics, you have people challenged in ways that are novel and in ways that increase sometimes those vulnerabilities that they already had. So the thing with this double exposure framework is that it helps you to see how people can benefit, but also can be affected by these kind of global dynamics going on. And the fact that they are adapting or responding not only to one single type of a stressor, but a combination of stressors. And that is what makes that very difficult to address, actually. And for people, very challenging. I mean, how do you deal with those things going on at the same time and sometimes in contradictory ways? For example, a big drought and also the loss of prices, the decreasing prices of agricultural products. So how do you deal with those at the same time? As a resource, as a producer with no resources, maybe a small scale producer, maybe some housewife in a little community. So it's kind of challenging for them and difficult to address for scientists too.
All right. Well, thank you, America. I think that's a very helpful way to understand how communities may be facing several pressures at the same time. I would like to continue with that idea, but looking more specifically at gender and everyday life. Your work also uses a feminist political ecology approach to understand the relationship between mining, gender, and rural livelihood. So, what have you learned about the different ways water and extractive activities affect women's everyday lives and also their opportunities?
Yes, well, that was one of the things that I included in my research trajectory. I think is one of the most recent focuses of my work, and it makes sense in the general context of sustainability. The presence of women and, more generally speaking, gender in sustainability issues is not as old as we might think. It started around half 20th century, last century, from 1970 and up to today. So in terms of water, is even more, is newer, and the presence of women related to these kind of topics. But for me, it was realizing that not every, even if everybody is affected by these types of combined dynamics, I mean, large scale mining for a global market, plus climate change manifested in your community, in rainfall, in heat, in everything that is going on, not everybody is affected in the same way. Not underserved populations, not feminine populations, women that are in charge of different things, old people, small scale producers, the youth, children, everybody's affected in different ways. Sometimes, from the point of view of a scientist, and also from the point of view of decision makers and politicians, it seems like populations is all homogeneous, right? It's all the same. And we are all equally affected by climate change. There is some truth to that. However, as scientists, we should look at the specific populations and see how those differences in social categories, for example, gender, age, your socioeconomic status, your level of education, all are influencing your capacity to adapt, your capacity to mitigate global warming, for example, the emissions that lead to global warming, and also the affectations, the effects that these processes have are different depending if you work in the mining operation, if you are a housewife, if you are a producer, if you are in charge of taking care of your relatives. So it's very important for me now to realize this, because if you are going to design better recommendations for climate change mitigation and adaptation, you cannot think that everybody is going to do the same and that everybody is going to be affected in the same way. So mining in particular in Sonora, it creates opportunities for women that work in mining. They are women that work in operations, that they drive the machinery, they do all sorts of things in the mining sector. But at the same time, this economic benefit enters or goes into a trade-off with ecological sustainability in the long run for these communities where they live and where they work. So in terms of Sonora and Arizona, that are very dry places and that are hotspots of climate change, that also have among the biggest operations in mining for copper, for gold, for different minerals, the competition that comes from that is important to see. And the water quality affectations, water quantity competition for water, all those things affect the life of rural communities and affect the life of women and men in a different way, because they both do different things for a living. So we don't have like the right answers, because it's very difficult to have kind of I don't know how to say it, just a right away answer, because you have these contradictions. People do want to work in these communities in mining, in rural mining, because the pay is very good, because it increases economic development in these communities. But at the same time, you have all these affectations that are uncertain, that you don't know what is going to happen when they combine with climate change and with water scarcity and with water drought. Um, so it's important to distinguish the different groups that are affected by these dynamics in the first place.
Thanks, America. I think that answer shows very clearly that women's experiences are not all the same, and that opportunities and burdens can exist at the same time. I also wanted to highlight the phrase you shared from your research, that women often cannot break the glass ceiling even with a miner's helmet.
Yes.
Yes, so I think that image is very powerful, and it connects very well with the purpose of this initiative, which is to make women's experiences and leaderships more visible. So you have also participated in work related to transparency. You work a lot, America. It's like we're talking
Well,
about mining, we're talking about gender, we're
you're
talking
talking
about
about the last, well, it's because it's the last 9
uh-huh.
years. So it's
Uh-huh.
a lot of years.
But
That's the
everything's
reason.
so
That's the
different.
reason.
Different and really interesting. So we're gonna change a little bit that topic.
Okay, thank
You
you.
have also participated in work related to transparency, access to information, and environmental justice in the Sonora River Basin. And I would like
Yes.
to know, why is access to environmental information so important for affected communities?
Well, thank you for the question. Yes, I was a participant in this research project financed or funded by the National Council of Science and Technology, the former CONACYT, because now it's CECITI, the Secretariat of Science and Technology and Innovation. And this project was a follow-up after the mine spill in the Sonora River Basin in 2014. So it connects water with mining, with affectations at the local level. But specifically, what this project was special, because the federal government in Mexico, promoted all these agendas of strategic topics. And part of the work that you had to do as a scientist was to connect with communities, to work with communities, and not only work from your desk or write your papers or do the usual academic tasks that we complete, but you have to actually go to the community, present something useful, valuable for them. So we came up with this social environmental observatory. And this is kind of a repository that communities in the river basin can access and can use. And they translated, I mean, because it was a big team. I was just one of many participants doing this work. So the idea was to translate scientific information in geosciences, in hydrology, in social sciences, even in psychology, because from psychology, we know that there are health affectations on children coming from the exposure to some of these minerals and toxics. So the idea was to give community a specific place where they could go and see this information in terms that were understandable, that were free for access. So I think it was a very beautiful experience in that way, because after the mine spill of 2014, people almost completely lost trust in the academic sector, because it was so difficult. I mean, it has so many impacts in their lives, in their livelihoods, in their water, in their environment. And academia was, I would say, kind of kidnapped, or I don't know if that is the correct term in English, by these corporate interests, very powerful interests from one of the largest mining groups in the world, that is Buenavista del Cobre in Cananea. So people didn't want to talk to any of us. I mean, it was a big challenge to reconnect, to gain trust again, to give them something useful. And information access is critical if they are going to do the defense of their territory based on scientific premises. So for us, it was very important to give that back to the community so they can have information to fundament, to, I don't know, to found a legal case, to go and advocate for their case, to participate with these big discussions for water planning in the state, in the federal, international level, the environmental court. I mean, it was kind of providing those kinds of things for people. And it was more than, I will say it was academic work, but more than that, it was a transmission and translation of scientific knowledge for the use of people in the Sonora River Basin. And in any case, I think one of the most important things to achieve governance that is adaptive is that you have these people participating in terms of knowledge production, knowledge sharing, translation from scientific language to the common use language. So it was very, very nice for me. It was kind of building another kind of experience as an academic.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us. I think that access to environmental information is such an important point. Information is not only technical, it is also connected to participation, trust, and accountability. Your work really shows how important it is to create spaces where communities can access to reliable information and also participate in decisions that affect them. So now I would like to shift a little bit from your research topics to your own experience working in academic, policy, and community experience.
Thank you for that question. My experience has been both challenging and rewarding too. I would like to tell you a story. When I started being a PhD student at the University of Arizona, I remember a meeting from the research team in which I started to collaborate. And I remember that we were talking about water in the San Pedro and the San Miguel River in Arizona and Sonora, respectively. And there were only 3 people in the room that were women. We were like 18 people or something like that, 15 to 18 people, and only 3 of us were women. So for me, it was kind of revealing of the nature of this field of studies. I mean, water policy, water academics, the majority of the people participating, at least in the past, has been men. So for me, coming to this world of water and getting to know other women actually emerging in the field has been very rewarding. And the things that I have learned, the things that I have been able to pursue studying these kinds of things is like, I am fascinating. I mean, it's one of the things that I love the most in my work, the kinds of things that you can see, that you can learn, that you can affect by your studies and your work with your students, and to get to know other women, like right now that we are exchanging these things. So it has allowed me to communicate, to work across different kind of disciplinary groups. And I have been very fortunate to collaborate with people on the other side of the border, people here in Mexico, and even people in communities that have other types of knowledge, other types of perspectives that are very important coming to a field that is very complex. And you actually need those kinds of diversities in terms of knowledge and perspectives. So right now, I am also in a leading position in my institution, and with that, we promote in the area in which I am right now. We promote environmental, social, health issues, all kinds of research projects from all the professors in my academic center. So I have realized how important it is that you have equity in terms of gender and also equity in terms of all the participation from underserved groups, because they know things that you don't know. They know the territory better than you do as an academic or as a politician or as a policymaker. So you really need to hear those people, the women that are in the communities, in the rural mining communities that I just mentioned before, the people that is contributing to the local governments, the environmental NGOs, the women that are in their households, taking care of the children, taking care of the home gardens. All these people have perspectives that we as academics or as politicians, we don't have. So it's very important to build these kinds of spaces for participation, not only in formal academia and not only for women that are in academia, but for all women involved in water issues and water management. So I think that is at the heart of good governance, the possibility to have all these different perspectives playing in decision-making processes.
Thanks, America. I really appreciate that reflection, especially the importance of working across disciplines and creating more inclusive spaces. I think that many of us have been in meetings or decision-making spaces where women's voices are still not as present as they should be, especially in
Yes.
science, in policy, and water-related issues. That is one of the
Yes.
reasons why this initiative is so meaningful. Women in Water gives an opportunity to highlight women's experiences, their leadership, their contributions, and also to remind younger generations that their perspectives are needed in these conversations. So to
Yes.
close, I would like to ask you to share a message for young women who may be interested in working in these fields.
Yes, we need you
We need
first
you.
in first place. No, but
Uh-huh.
as you were saying, I totally agree with the things that you were saying just before the question for closing this interview. We need everybody, and especially women, and especially young women, to
Mhm.
recognize that their perspectives and their experiences are very valuable for the field of water governance and water understandings. The challenges that we have are so wicked. I mean, they are water wicked problems, require very diverse voices, very diverse knowledge systems, and they require all kinds of leaderships in all levels of organization. You not only require federal policy, for example, here in Mexico, that we have a very centralized water administration system. We need leadership even at the level of a town, of a little locality, a little community needs leadership for water governance. That's the first part. Promote leadership and understand that your values, your perspectives, your experiences are valuable as a young woman in water science. The second thing is that don't be afraid to work across disciplines. That is very difficult. And I think one of the things that I value the most from the Arid Lands Resource Science program that also Elia shared and Adriana and other people that collaborates with the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters is this possibility of bridging disciplines, of knowing more about natural sciences. Even if I am a social scientist, having these criteria from the natural sciences, from climate sciences, even if I am not an expert, for example, in the natural dynamic of climate change, the biochemical explanation of climate change, I understand it enough to actually collaborate with somebody that do know that. So at the same time, I think that I can provide the social science and policy expertise to those people that are working on the other side of the problem. So it's very important that you collaborate, that you create these networks of interdisciplinary people that can promote the solution to these very complex problems, because problems, they are multidimensional, and at this time, I mean, they are very difficult to address from one single discipline. The third thing is to stay connected to communities, just like this one. The Permanent Forum of Binational Waters is such a good space for learning. I mean, for continuous learning. I have attended some of the talks, some of the cafes, and it's information right away. I mean, it's something that you can use in your everyday practice right away. So it's very important that we keep these spaces, even if ideologies or politicians change in any place of the world. But right now is something heartfelt, I think, in both communities in Mexico and the United States. These kinds of spaces are here to save us from from those kinds of separations that are artificial and, I hope, short-lived. And finally, be persistent and trust your abilities. If you are not heard the first time because you are women, because you are very young, because you are just starting in the field, because there are these more experienced senior people working, that doesn't mean that what you have to say, if you say it from a well-founded, respectful, and ethical position, just keep saying it. Sometimes it's just being persistent what makes the difference in terms of how you participate in these spaces. And we really need this new generation of women researchers, practitioners, leaders at different levels who are committed to another form of water governance for the region. And I am very happy that this space exists, that Elia is here asking these wonderful questions. And not all of them feel easy. It takes a while to organize ideas and to try to answer. But I think these spaces are excellent for building this kind of leadership that we are in need of, and we are in very, very high need, I will say, because it's a very challenging world out there in terms of climate change and in terms of economic pressure and in terms of new generations coming to the discussion. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, America, for this beautiful message to close this interview. I really appreciate your invitation for young women to be persistent, to trust their abilities, to work across disciplines, stay connected to communities, create a network of interdisciplinary teams, and also keep speaking from a well-founded, respectful, and ethical position. So, on behalf of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters and the Women in Water Initiative, we would like to thank you so much for sharing your time, your experience, and your reflections with us today. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us. We invite you to continue following the Women in Water interviews through the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters, where we will continue highlighting the voices and contributions of women working on water issues across the US-Mexico border region. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Women in Water, a bilingual initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. In this podcast, we are dedicated to empowering women, challenging stereotypes, and delving into essential water issues. We highlight the knowledge and experience of women committed to our environment, especially in the border region between Mexico and the United States. Hear from women in politics, activists, businesswomen, teachers, scientists, and many other professionals who share a common purpose. Water unites us.